the quality of the idea almost doesn't exist. It's the timing of the idea. So you could have the world's worst idea and not be great at executing it, but still make $1 billion if everyone in the world wants something similar to what you have. As opposed to you could be the best executor, the best idea in the world, but if no one cares, it's purely time. So what we're saying here is there's many different types of scheduling. There's one type that is on an absolute rocket ship. If I was going to pick between two things, I'd probably pick between the one that's going to pay me twice as much for the exact same job as the one that's not.
Podcast, where we tackle challenges that planning and schedule leaders come across on a day-to-day basis. My name is Micah, and I'm a planning and scheduling manager for Intel.
And my name's Greg Lawton. I'm the CEO of an AI schedule management company called Nodes and Links.
Each show is designed to give you tactics that you can use straight away. Today, Greg and I are going to take a little bit of a wild ride on the journey of random. We have a couple different topics that we've seen in the news recently that we just want to discuss. Greg, do you want to kick things off with a government report? And please don't leave, because this government report is going to be exciting.
Yeah. So this week, the UK government, specifically the Infrastructure Projects Authority, which is a department of the UK Treasury, it looks over all of the infrastructure projects that government is buying. It released a report called Data Analytics and Artificial Intelligence in Government Project Delivery. And long story short, credit where it's due, actually. It's a remarkably well put together report where they've talked to many government departments and got consensus and processes between departments. Long story short, it's basically saying this. They absolutely will be using AI to deliver projects faster, cheaper, more sustainably, etc. There will be absolutely requirements for people on those projects to be skilled in using AI. The government will require sharing of data between organizations and companies and projects. So,
that's the spicy one right there.
That is a very spicy one, because you know the world that I work in. There's a couple of companies who are like, I won't say tiny players, but the market's a very big, very, very big place, and they're like, oh, our data is incredibly valuable. There's 500 of you. Okay, so this is going to throw a spanner in that. They're going to do shared big experiments, and another part which I don't really know if they're, what it's going to be, what the execution is going to look like. But basically, they want to take a startup entrepreneurship approach where, and I'll quote directly here, we will think big, start small, and scale fast across our diverse projects. So I think that's around entrepreneurship and innovation principles. Let's see if the governance machine can cope with that.
Yeah. Is this specifically focused on construction projects as well?
No. So the Infrastructure Projects Authority looks over all UK government spending. The vast majority is infrastructure or defence. So the defence, the build, I'll probably get the numbers wrong, but I think the defence build budget is about 20 billion a year, pounds, like $30 billion, something like that. And the actual infrastructure is about the same. So I think they're about 50-50. But you also have things like Environment Agency, the justice, so things like prisons and law courts, and councils. So you have lots of different departments. But like the really big stuff is defence, which is fighter jets, nuclear subs, boats, bases, and infrastructure. So that will be main roads, utilities, rail, shipyards, airports, that kind of thing.
Yeah. That's pretty wild. And going back to that one we said that was spicy, the sharing of data, I've spoke about it many times before, where I definitely see a future of more shared data, more larger data sets that are freely accessible. what do you think that is going to drive or change with the delivery of these projects now?
Well, first of all, it depends about what data they're specifically talking about here. Like, is it going to be detailed cost data or detailed schedule
Yeah.
data, or is it going to be overarching summary data? I don't know, but I think it's going to be. I don't know because they are forcing what is almost a perfectly competitive market in the UK to be even more competitive, which means that one of two things is going to happen. You're going to have large amounts of consolidation, or you're going to have a very fragile market. So I don't know. And let me unpack that and explain it.
Yeah, you're going to need to, because I was thinking there'd be almost the opposite.
So I'm thinking here about the general contractor level. So clients, there's a couple of clients, but there's two phases of project delivery. There's the bid phase where the client has all the power, and then there's the delivery phase where it's equal. It's 50-50 really in the prisoner's dilemma dynamics. In the bid phase, no one construction company in the UK has more than something like 8% market share. It's almost and it goes down to about 2% very quickly, and then I think there's something like, I think the top 50 construction companies in the UK have combined about 50% market share. Like it's if you picked up a textbook, it's perfectly competitive.
Yeah.
There's very little differentiation between any of them because they can all go out and rent the same diggers, and they can all go out and find people who can dig holes, and they all subcontract. So they go to different electricians and they buy concrete off the same people. So there's very little difference between any of them, really, apart from the ones who do super specialists like defense building or something like that.
Yeah.
And because of that, they exist on very low margins. If you then basically say one thing that you consider to be one of your last bastions of competitive advantage, which is your data, which you and I know hardly anyone uses properly. But let's imagine a world where they did. The main client is now saying, you will share your data or I'm not even going to consider you for a bid.
Yeah.
So that's what I meant by it's going to drive. Now, either the two options I said, either it's going to drive like great fragility, which means fragility means that people are going to lower their profit rates even more, which means any shock to the system will put half of them out of business. Or the other is great consolidation, because in these kind of industries, there might just be just a massive economy of scale where they just go, do you know what? Let's all just consolidate, become one giant company, and then
red fish eats blue fish type of
exactly.
Deal. Starting small though, and then launching up. Should we make bets on where they start small? I'm saying it's safety. Everybody always starts with safety.
100%, yeah.
It
will be safety.
Safety is important, but when anybody says we're going to start small, they're always do safety.
It will also, by the way, I reckon, be BIM data.
Yeah, probably. BIM data is such a kitchen noodle soup of what is actually BIM data. There's just, when you think about how many different sorts of dimensions and fields and potentials to share, BIM data is crazy, but I don't know. We'll see. How do you think do you think it'll actually, so one of the things that gets pushed back whenever I bring this up is that you said that you'll have different things will happen in that competitive market. How do you foresee, the competition actually? Is there a path where the competition can use the data to use their competitors' data to become better than themselves? Like, do you see that angle playing out? Because that's usually the pushback I get. Of course. If we share our data, we'll lose our competitive advantage.
Nah, so there's two things that matter in competitive strategy. Once you know you're in a competitive environment, which is information asymmetry and credible commitment. What you're talking about is information asymmetry. So if someone just knows how things work more than others, then they have a distinct advantage. But my experience of nearly 2 decades in the project space is that information asymmetry only really exists in us in the project space at capability level, and capability is people, processes, and tools. So if you talk about having data around people, or data around processes, or data around tools, cool, data is one aspect, but execution ability across those combined into a capability is really what matters. So for example, you know, I could, I could just release to the market our machine learning algorithms. I could. I can guarantee that almost no one would be able to do anything with them because they're just not trained to understand them. That kind of thing. And I could imagine this, that a bunch of people might be releasing data to the market. Almost no one has built billion-dollar companies before, so almost no one will look at it and really be able to kind of pick it apart and understand what it really means. I think what will happen in these kind of reports, like you said, is they'll pull together non-conflationary data sources like safety, something everyone's happy to share, and then there'll be some centralized body that does studies and does all of this, and then they'll run workshops, and it will get better. It will absolutely get better, but it will be what I'll call the progression of the average, not the progression of the exception.
Yeah.
The people who are exceptional, the data that the industry will be sharing will be 5 steps behind their thinking. Like they'll be thinking on predictive carbon measurements, or multiple currency trades in project controls. Like they'll be thinking far beyond basic stuff.
But that to me seems to be where I like where the government fits, is more of a let's rise all the boats up type of position, as
totally
opposed
agree.
to, because when I think sometimes the governments get too far in front of their skis, then they start dictating too much future policy, as opposed to just, hey, let's take this up to a next level. Speaking of next level, let's transition a little bit. Talk a bit more about different infrastructure. How about this data center boom that is continuing on? Almost like your favorite investment, Bitcoin, just seems to keep on going up and to the right. I saw an article the other day. I don't know if it's true or not, but there was leaked maybe that Microsoft and OpenAI were going to create some crazy $100 billion data center. And then overall, just the continuation of building more and more data centers.
I think it's probably one of the safest investments you could make, like investing in companies that build data
Bitcoin
centers
or
right
data
now.
centers?
Oh, data centers. Data center. I don't know anything about crypto really. You can only be an expert in so many things. Like so here's the thing. I remember reading this book ages ago. I can't remember which one it was, but it was essentially a history of emperors and warlords essentially dominating the assets that society needs. So, far back in history, it'd be like access to the river, or it'd be, access to the fertile land, this kind of thing. And then it was access to the iron mines and the gold mines. And, I remember Cornwall in the UK got very rich because it had a lot of tin. So it was like, you just have a lot of tin. Nowadays, there's certain countries that have a lot of access to oil and other countries that don't, that probably wish they did. But as society is progressing far more into a digital realm than a physical one, obviously you'll always need farms and you'll always need energy, etc. But you got to think, like, what is the equivalent of the river or the fields of crop, the fertile land, or the mines in the digital realm? Well, it's storage and compute. So, like, that is the next bastion, actually, of international competition. So, you've got Saudi Arabia saying they want to have $40 billion invested into AI infrastructure. Not AI, AI infrastructure. That means data centers and chip build.
Yeah.
NVIDIA has crossed 2 trillion valuation now. So the way I'm looking at this is the, in inverted commas, kings and queens of the modern day realizing that America exists. And they're sending as many ships across as fast as they possibly can to put a flag down and claim it for Queen Elizabeth. They're just doing it in data
I don't know
world.
where to take this analogy to say that,
Yeah.
America's going to become its
Was
own
it
country.
Queen Elizabeth or Queen Victoria? I can't remember, actually. There's a lot of British
I don't
history.
remember. Yeah.
The British crown. They were claiming for the British, the French, the Spanish, the Portuguese. I don't think Germany really sent anyone over to the New World. It's definitely those four.
You're gonna offend a lot of Germans right now by saying, you know what?
No, this is just my history. I'm not saying they did or they didn't. I just don't know. I never heard about the German Tea Party in America. I just heard about the British one.
We threw a bunch of sausages overboard. For people getting into the industry or early on in their careers right now, perfect space to start flooding into. I mean, there's loads of jobs that I've seen for junior schedulers up to senior schedulers. Now, you may have to move to one of these data center sites, but perfect time to get in, understand an industry, understand a build. And as mentioned on the show before, you can translate to a lot of different sorts of roles and positions outside of data centers. Because it is such a hot market, people put a bit more prestige on it, I would say. And that's the one thing I'm looking at right now is, this is really starting to become an industry where there's loads of planning and scheduling jobs. And they're with top companies that if they continue to grow, the evaluations continue to grow. And if they give you equity, you're in a great place. And so I was talking with a person who reached out to me, and I was saying, listen, get your scheduling chops up and then get to a GC that's building one of these companies or building and has a data center division, and just tell them, I want to work on data centers. I'll literally move anywhere. I want to work on a data center no matter what. Then from there, once you understand that data center build, go for an owner, go for a Vantage, an Equinix, or go for a Google or Facebook or Microsoft, and then try and go that route with it. I think that's a pretty good, 1 to 3, 5-year plan, because that's going to net you quite a nice career.
You'd be sitting on Microsoft shares that will be going through a question, Micah. So you've done half a decade of data center build, and now you've done I don't know how many years of chip manufacturing, which is a different ballgame. You said a statement before, which I agree with, by the way, but for the audience, which is data centers, once you've learned to plan, you can plan. How different are data centers to chip fabs?
Wildly more complex. I mean,
data centers are more complex than chip
fabs. No, chip fabs are way more complex because they require far more chemicals. But if that's the hurdle you're jumping over. Mm-hmm. So you're an excellent planner. You know how to plan. You bring a wide variety of tool sets and capabilities. Being able to convince someone that you can learn about different chemicals and processes. When I say processes, I mean the actual processes that build the chips, not different planning processes. Mm-hmm. Convincing someone of that is, I think, a much easier task. Basically, when I look at it, and I don't know, the pitchforks will probably come out and be like, you're an idiot, Micah. But I just look at almost data centers are almost just smaller versions of chip fabs. They're just smaller, less complex. Like, you don't need acid waste and high project, blah, blah, choric acid, this utility, that you'll need to create chips. What you do have is you have power and you have water, and they meet in the middle. And there's different, clean levels that are acceptable. Data centers compared to chip fab are like the carnival, super dirty, compared to different areas in sort of a fab. And so that's to me where, but I think it's transferable. And then I look at a data center compared to like a hospital, or a data center compared to different sorts of buildings, large scale infrastructure. Mm-hmm. And you also, with the data center, you get to touch a lot of different things. There's utilities that get built, substations. I mean, I can't even imagine, how many substations the line needs to build. But it's probably insane. But you get to learn about substations, and you get to learn about waste treatment facilities. And again, I guess if I was early on in my career, that's where I would be looking to try and position. I'm a bit biased, but it seems to me get into data centers and then try and get to the owner's side as fast as possible.
I'll agree with that, and I'll add a comment from venture capital, which is the quality of the idea almost doesn't exist. It's the timing of the idea. So you could have the world's worst idea and not be great at executing it, but still make $1 billion if everyone in the world wants something similar to what you have. As opposed to you could be the best executor, the best idea in the world, but if no one cares, it's purely time. So what we're saying here is there's many different types of scheduling. There's one type that is on an absolute rocket ship. If I was going to pick between two things, I'd probably pick between the one that's going to pay me twice as much for the exact same job as the one that's not. Audience, take that as you wish. You can decide what you want. If you're super passionate about roads, go for it. You'll see Micah and I in data centers and chip fabs.
I like roads.
Roads are more complex than you think.
Either way, I guess I completely agree with you on. It's just what do you want to do with your life? Or like what? What's your angle? What's your passion? What's your motivations? You may get into data centers and just hate it and not like it. And you may like roads, but definitely dive into whatever your niche is, dive into it as hard as you can and become a specialist in it. I think that's probably another takeaway from this. And this just looks to me like a great specialist to jump into that's going to have longevity and also provide generational wealth to many, many, many people who jump into it, which I think is another thing. One other topic in terms of career growth, career trajectory. What are your thoughts about people pinging you on LinkedIn and asking for PMP certifications?
So for everyone listening, Mike has just thrown me a live grenade and he's asked me to sing to it. So most education is good education. It's generally better to learn something than to not learn something. You will never find the highest paid, most entrepreneurial people sitting there with a bunch of certifications. Quite frankly, because you can learn what you need to learn in 100th of the time without jumping through the shitty hoops that are put in on any generic course. Any generic courses have to have, here's what you're going to learn, here's a test, write this essay, it's going to be hard to get this mark, blah, 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 rubbish. General certifications have to have that kind of thing to have an air of legitimacy, because what they're doing is catering to a very large population. The people at the top of the game, Micah, for people listening here, you might not see, but Micah might smile at this. Micah, how many people are asking you nowadays, what education do you have?
Not a lot, which is a good thing.
No. Once you're getting to the point where you are very seasoned, people only care about the results that you deliver, and they expect you to be disciplined and mature enough to figure out your own education. A certification is great. It's almost like a base university degree to me. It shows someone that you can actually do work and you can wake up and breathe air and you can understand, basic English, etc. But it's not going to differentiate someone in the long run in their master career. The other thing as well I'd say is, I forget the Latin, but it's the, who benefits is the translation. And it's like the organizations that develop certifications, their business model is predicated on selling training courses for certifications and exams. So they're incentivized to make certifications the center of the universe. If certifications were the center of the universe, we wouldn't need to build any projects, because we'd just get certified and then be like, well, we don't need to build anything. I'd be like, building stuff and creating stuff is the center of the universe. Certifications is just a way of gaining knowledge and education to hopefully be able to do it a bit better. I'm being very political with my viewpoints today.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
Michael, what are yours?
There is a quote which I will completely butcher, but it was about, standing on the shore of your own ignorance. And if you look directly out at the ocean, you don't know. But if you look down the shoreline, you realize that, like, you're super, like, what you don't know, you don't know. And the mark of intelligence is knowing what you don't know. And I think what's another piece I picked up recently that I saw was, it's really hard for someone who comes to our level to look back and put themselves in the shoes of people that are just getting started. And I've been helping a couple people out recently, and I just realized, what took me years to grasp, I sometimes expect them to grasp in minutes. Like, hey, figure out how this works in P6, or why don't you know that the 10 knowledge areas of the PMP? So I do think they serve a good purpose to provide base level education and knowledge. And they're also super helpful in an industry where you cannot get a college degree in construction planning or scheduling to provide knowledge and skill sets. To me, where that starts to erode is as you start to get upper and upper into your career, there are different lanes you can take to then elevate yourself to the next level. And oftentimes, deciding between a PMP and an MBA and something else is, often to me, I'm like, well, what experience is actually going to get you there versus what certification or education or anything like that. And so to me, that's where, please stop messaging me on LinkedIn. I don't need any more PMP certifications. I actually have a degree in project management, and I if I wanted to, should be teaching those courses, and I don't need any more reminders.
The fact that you get spammed should tell people listening about the goal of it's to sell courses, not to. Now, don't get me wrong. If you're in a company and there's an amazing planner or controller who goes, guys, girls, I'm just going to put on a 10 lecture series of everything I wish I had known for the last 10 years. My God, go to it. Like, that is unbelievable education. And like, I'm going to throw up P6, I'm going to throw up notes, whatever. Like, I'm going to throw up Excel. I'm going to do stuff. And I'm like, take notes. Like, that is a proper education. It is. Someone said something to me a while ago, which is, it's interesting that a lot of get-rich-money schemes are not taught by people who are rich. It's the same here. It's amazing that a bunch of planning and controls education is not taught by the people at the top of planning and controls who are making the mega bucks doing it. If one of those people turns around and says, I will show you how to do this, fucking listen, my God. But if someone's spamming you on LinkedIn about some generic certification, okay, well, how valuable do you think that's really going to be?
And at this point, we'd like to announce the Beyond Deadlines PMP certification.
If we did a certification, Micah, I would insist it's in free for people. Like, come on.
$9.99.99. You can sign up at the link below. We also offer a booster course for $5.99. And all of our AI fake LinkedIn account bots will be reaching out to you shortly.
And every chorus is just a sales pitch for the next chorus, by the way.
How's this not a pyramid scheme? All right. Well, folks, we're at time for this episode. Hope you enjoyed some of the topics we covered and discussions we went over. If you could do me one favor this week, if you could like or subscribe to the podcast on wherever you're listening to, YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and share it with a friend. Help us grow this community so we can keep doing this. Greg and I love creating these shows and providing guests and create better content for you. So for us at Beyond Deadlines, have a great week.